Hello and welcome to It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Joining me today is Roelof van Dijk, who is Senior Director, National Research and Analytics for Colliers Canada. Thanks for joining us today, Roelof.
Thank you, Mario.
Well, you guys just recently put out your Q4 National Office report. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about Calgary in that. One of the things that I noticed, and obviously has been big news in Calgary for years now, is the office vacancy rate. Overall, you guys pegged it at 25.7%, but the downtown market at 28.2%. Tell me a little bit about what's happening with the office market these days in Calgary.
Absolutely. As we all know, Calgary's had some issues with the oil and energy sector and the hollowing out of the downtown core there. So suffering from relatively high vacancy rates over the last, I'd probably put it at 5 years. And leading into, even prior to the pandemic, you had quite a high amount of sublet space. It's been coming down over the years as space has been reverting to the landlords, but still relatively high amount of sublet space. And so you have that as you enter the pandemic, and as a result of the pandemic, just like every other market, you're dealing with more sublet space coming back to the market, a greater amount of businesses experiencing hardships and small vacancies entering the market as a result of that. So you really, where you have a Vancouver that started at exceptionally low vacancy rates and the vacancy rate has doubled. The good news is Calgary's vacancy rate hasn't doubled downtown, but it's definitely moved up since the pandemic. Yeah. And you're probably dealing with the same issue, or you will be dealing with the same issues over the next few years as people try and figure out how to utilize that space as everyone returns to the office, not to mention M&A and all that interesting stuff that's going on over the next year and how that's going to play out.
Yeah, let's talk about the sublet space as a percentage of overall vacancy. Your numbers showing 20.7% currently for the office market. First of all, maybe if for the uninitiated, let me explain what sublet space is, and is that a high percentage?
So yes, sublet space is essentially a company has committed to space over the term of their lease, and they realize they don't need it anymore for a variety of reasons, and then they try and sublet it out to another tenant to recoup some of the costs that they may otherwise incur of having empty space. And it is important. From the landlord's point of view, they're technically still getting paid. Yeah. So in their point of view, it's not necessarily as important right at the start of this. But as sublet space increases, it takes on a bigger portion of the market, and then landlords start competing. Now, when you look at that number that you quoted, about 21% from our Q4 statistics, normally I would say yes, that is relatively high. That is market impacting. Now, for Calgary, it's a different story because I'd argue about 4 years ago, over 50% of the downtown market was sublet space. So 21% actually not that bad. Yeah. And when you start looking at the overall picture, in the beginning of the pandemic, Calgary had the highest amount of sublet space as a percentage of overall vacant space. But now if you look at a market like Vancouver, 45% of their downtown market is currently sublet space. Yeah. So that immediate percentage is actually looking better in Calgary. However, the actual amount of square footage is still higher in Calgary because the vacancy rate is higher and so forth. But at the end of the day, landlords are going to start competing with this space, or they're already competing in Calgary. And it basically means if these sublet spaces have significant term, and some of them do, and the landlord is ultimately competing on a long-term lease, they need to pay attention to that.
Okay, you mentioned square footage. Let's talk about from the office perspective, the net asking rate per square foot was $13.62 for Calgary. It was the lowest asking rate of major cities across Canada. Does that mean that, do you think that Calgary becomes a really nice and attractive market for companies that may want to move here right now, considering the costs?
Yeah, I mean, a low rental rate is definitely an incentive for a company to look to a market like Calgary, especially. I mean, we're hearing more and more of some tech companies. Some of them are homegrown, some of them, are not. But a lot of the homegrown ones are really taking advantage of the fact that vacancy is high, rental rates are exceptionally low, and if they can lock in for 10 years on space that they believe they're going to use over the next year, 2 year, whatever, as they expand, why not do it? Take advantage of the situation right
Yeah.
now, and that's what we're seeing with some of these homegrown tech companies now. Um, I mean, when we quote the net asking rent, we also have to keep in mind that that is what the landlord's asking. And right now, well, in Calgary, there's been a lot of negotiation. So the
Yeah.
net effective rent, which is after you consider inducements and any types of packages, free rent and what have you, is probably in single digits for Calgary. And the interesting thing is when you look at Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, those markets, I mean, they did not have really any incentives last year. And now landlords are offering incentives, whether it's free rent, a few other perks here and there. So the NERs are moving down in some of the other markets where we haven't seen that before.
Okay, super. One last question about the actual office market. When you're looking at, and specifically about downtown, when you're looking at the downtown office space into 2021, do you expect that 28.2% vacancy to continue to rise?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do. And part of that is because of the mergers and acquisitions that we heard about before. You could probably expect some more sublet space to come on the market as a result of that. You're probably going to see more sublet space come on the market from other companies that aren't necessarily doing that great. I have a feeling that even though we have, vaccines being rolled out, the office sector is still going to see some more space coming back throughout 2021. And what you're probably going to see is as we get closer to the other side of this and people get more comfortable with the idea of how they're going to come back to work, then you're going to start seeing less space come back on the market, but more commitments for additional space as companies look to growth and how they want to bring back people back to the office. But we're probably still at least 6 months before they're ready to really make those decisions.
Yeah. And of course, we had the Husky Synovus merger, right? That's going
Absolutely.
to play a big part in what that
Yeah.
space is going to look like downtown Calgary here in the coming months, right?
Yeah, when you take into consideration the number of people that they're talking about potentially, laying off, and the amount of square feet per person that those current people occupy, then definitely a big chunk of space might be coming back on that one.
Okay. Okay. Enough negative stuff. Let's talk a little. End this off with a little
Yeah.
positive. Let's look at the industrial real estate market in Calgary. Now, its vacancy rate is 6.2%, and it has been rising, but still, that's still at a healthy number, isn't it?
Hmm. No, it absolutely is, and I mean that's not exceptionally high for Calgary. I mean, if you were to compare it to Vancouver, yes, it is much higher, but Vancouver's vacancy rate is ridiculously low, almost to the point where it's stifling tenants that are looking to grow, and that's why you're seeing multi-story buildings there. But
Yeah.
there's enough options in Calgary. There's still developable land there. So companies can grow, and we're seeing that. The e-commerce side of things, grocery distribution, you
Mhm.
name it, those types of users are still going to expand.
Yeah.
I think there will be a bit of a mismatch with some of the older buildings, perhaps lower clear height, that may have seen users such as kids play gyms or experiential type users go in there over the last few years. Those are the ones that are
Yeah.
suffering right now. So that's where you're seeing space come back, but the demand is in that large bay, high clear height type space, and that's going to continue driving uh, demand for space and driving rents as well.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, my pleasure.
Okay, that was Roelof van Dijk, who is the Senior Director, National Research and Analytics for Colliers Canada. This has been It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Thanks for joining us today.